Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Don Stinson. I wanted to take just a few minutes to talk a little bit about my philosophy in teaching Comp 2 and why I structured the first two units the way that I have. I'm asked a lot of times by just people in the community, teachers in other fields, etc., what the biggest problem is that I see in student writing today. And I think most often they expect me to say too much technology has destroyed their writing skills, or you just can't get them to work hard enough. But I don't think those are the biggest problems, nor are the biggest problems related to sentence structure or punctuation or spelling or any of the mechanics of writing. I believe that the biggest problem in most student writing today is related to a larger problem in student learning today, and that is a failure to value learning for its own sake, to value writing for its own sake, and instead to treat every academic task, including writing an essay, as simply a task to be done in order to get a grade, in order to get a credit, in order to get a degree, in order to get a job starting at $60,000 a year with full benefits. And it's not your fault. Ever since at least 2001, when Education Secretary Margaret Spellings introduced the now famous or infamous No Child Left Behind concept that she had pioneered in Texas, we have emphasized in education in this country, first at the K through 12 level and now increasingly at the higher ed level, testing, assessment, scores, grades, and competition. Now, those things are important. Don't get me wrong. I always enjoyed making good grades. I always hated getting bad grades. Like you guys, I wanted to do well because I wanted people to think well of me, and I wanted to be proud of my achievement. But along the way, that became secondary to the actual process of learning. And I can tell you right now that I learned more in some classes that I made B's or even C's in than I did in classes I made easy A's in. I think, if we look at the future, and sometimes in this class I do a whole unit on futurism, one of the things that most futurists predict, and we see it happening now, and we've seen it happening for the last 30, 40 years at least, is the replacement of human workers by technology. And that is only going to accelerate under present trends, no matter who the president is, no matter which party dominates Congress, no matter what is going on culturally. That process seems unstoppable. And what that means practically is that in the future, there won't be enough jobs for everyone to be working 40 hours a week. What seems, to me at least, to be increasingly likely is that we'll have to readjust our whole definition of what a full-time job is. And we'll have to readjust our whole definition of what work is to some degree. All right? And when we do so, we may end up with a full-time job being 30 hours a week, or even 25 hours a week. So what do we do with the rest of our time? Do we just watch cat videos on YouTube? Now, don't get me wrong, I like cat videos on YouTube, but do we do that? Do we play, video games more? Do we spend more time watching sports on TV? What do we fill our time with? Well, an educated person, someone who values learning, has developed curiosity about a large range of subjects. And that person may choose to fill their time with learning something new. Now, I know that will be true of many of you and is true of many of you. In our mission statement here at NOC, we talk about creating lifelong learners. Right? I'm a lifelong learner. My wife is a lifelong learner. My 3 children are lifelong learners. We're a family of lifelong learners. Now, you may call us nerds. None of us were very good at sports, it's true. But we are good at learning. We're curious people. We're people that like to travel. We're people that like to experience new things. We're people, whether it be trying new food or a new activity or learning a new language or learning to play a musical instrument. We're constantly challenging ourselves, just looking up stuff, just because we want to know. Right? Now, people that have that mindset, they produce good essays. Yeah, they may have sentence fragments in them, they may have some agreement problems, they may have some wording problems, but their essays are interesting because they're paying attention, right? They're focused, they're engaged. And engagement, it seems to me, starts with reflection. It starts with being aware of how little we know and how much there is to know. As you know, from looking at the videos about the 7 parts of critical thinking, humility is one of them, intellectual humility. Stupid and ignorant people are often incredibly arrogant. They'll say things like, well, I know what I know, and no one's going to change my mind, right? Okay, Grandpa, that's fine, but the fact is, you may be dead wrong, and stubbornly refusing to listen to reason and evidence that might lead you to believing something that's actually true, rather than believing, as you do now, something that's actually false, right? Truly intellectual people tend to be modest. They'll say things like, well, it's possible I could be wrong, but I firmly believe from my research and from what I've read that blah, 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 right? They have respect for opposing views, unless they see that those opposing views are just built on smoke and mirrors, right? In that case, they're honest enough to call those opposing views out for being dishonest. But they don't do it in a rude way, and they don't do it in a, ha-ha, I know more than you do way. So in the first unit, I wanted us to start with Plato's allegory of the cave, which always seems like a perfect place to start talking about thinking and thinking about thinking and writing about thinking, right? Obviously, the prisoner who escapes from the cave has to shift his entire perspective. I'm only using the masculine pronoun because that's what Plato used. Because back then, women, their status was not so good. But the prisoner who escapes from the cave and realizes that everything he has experienced in his life up until then has been an illusion, has his eyes opened. His perspective has shifted entirely. And several of you in your rough drafts of Essay 1 wrote very well about experiences you'd had or moments in your life when you were forced to shift your perspective. So in Unit 2, we're going to move on after dabbling some in perspective shift and learning at least some basic terminology related to critical thinking and what critical thinkers do. We're going to move on to rhetoric. Rhetoric is an ancient discipline. It goes back at least to classical Greek times, a few hundred years before the time of Christ, and particularly to Aristotle, who is a towering figure in the field of rhetoric. He wrote a book, which in Latin we would call Rhetorica, or the Rhetoric, and its basic principles of ethos, logos, and pathos are still used in discourse today, probably millions of times each and every day. They're fairly simple principles, and in a future video or a series of notes, I'll talk more about those. But it laid the groundwork for every rhetorical system that's come since, including the 3 contemporary systems of Rogerian rhetoric, Toulmin rhetoric, and social judgment theory, which are on one of the PowerPoints that you'll be looking at during Unit 2. So Unit 2, we get into argumentation. We also get into formal research. And I will be back with either videos or notes to orient you more to what I expect from Essay 2 more about Modern Language Association or MLA format and how to do that correctly, how to cite sources within the paper, etc. So check back frequently leading up to next Tuesday, I believe, when the first essay, or the second essay rather, is due. And I'll stay in touch. Bye for now.